Welcome to Versus, where we will give simple answers to cycling's most important questions. No, actually, we're going to pick a question each week related to training or recovery or technology and try to discuss the different sides of it, the different angles of it. I will make a disclaimer up front that I think most of these topics that we would discuss will actually not have a very simple and straightforward answer. And occasionally, one or both of us might have very strong opinions one way or another, but there's a reason why we talk about these things. So my name is Colin Sandberg, coach at the Endurance Collective, and I'm here with Ben Turits, coach and founder of the Endurance Collective. We're going to try to provide our insight based on our experience and training and expertise, but hopefully when we feel like that's not adequate, we'll bring in some expert guests as well. So welcome.
Good to be with you, Colin. You know, it's this is the first time doing our own podcast, so I can't wait to kick things off and really get into what we disagree on.
Oh yeah. I'm sure we'll have some good ones.
Absolutely. Mountain versus road. There we go. That's number one.
That's episode 2.
Yeah.
So for the first episode, the topic is going to be simple versus complicated workouts. So I'll start off with this question. Ben, how would you define simple versus complicated? Where would you draw the line?
So, you know, as an athlete, I've certainly had a share of complicated workouts where, you know, the first thing that comes to mind is, you know, like a piece of painter's tape on your top tube.
Yeah.
And, you know, multiple intervals
Clipboard.
that you're just, constantly looking down and trying to remember what you're supposed to be doing. And, as a coach, I really prefer that my athletes have a pretty solid understanding of what they're doing and why they're doing it. And I find it is difficult to do that if there are more than 3 or 4 or 5 different types of intervals within a workout. I really do think it is important to focus on a theme, make sure people understand it, and not just add in complicated intervals for interval's sake or for data's sake, whatever it is.
Well, one might argue that there might be times when you want to keep the athlete in the dark. You know, ignorance is bliss.
Absolutely.
Or just like throw something at them and see how they do, see what their interpretation is.
Oh, absolutely. And you know, I see this, I'm not sure about you, Colin, but I was personally an athlete who didn't test well. And I coach multiple athletes who don't, the second they see the word test, it's a failure.
Yeah.
And so I hide tests in their workouts. But yeah, they usually, you know, they know I coach simple, and they can usually sniff that out to some extent. So I have to kind of find different ways to hide it.
Yeah. I've had the same thing where I've had athletes that really stress out if I say 20-minute field test, but I can just say today's workout is go as hard as you can for 20 minutes and see what you can do. But I don't say the word test in there, and it's a very different response.
Totally changes their perspective on the workout and how they feel about it. And a lot of times I get a better result, right?
Yeah, totally. So obviously you err on the simple workout side of this. Can you tell me what the advantages would be there?
I think it's a lot easier to understand what you're doing and execute. You know, I've certainly given my share of complicated workouts, and I find execution becomes the challenge. You know, workouts where you're counting down time and intervals and you're doing 20 or 30 different intervals can be a challenge. Not to say, you know, say you're a cyclocross racer and you have a high variability event that you're training for. And when you're getting close to, within 4 to 6 weeks of that event, you give them some specificity. Maybe 30 over 30s is a common repetitive workout, but it's repetitive. It's easy to wrap your head around. I coach a lot of marathon style mountain bike racers. So we end up doing a lot of long sweet spot intervals, pretty simple. And, I really prefer to have my athletes have buy-in and understanding of what they're doing, because I feel like, if something does go wrong and they need to call an audible, they know what we're trying to accomplish, and they can do that with their best guess and an educated mindset.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think too, part of it for me is like, we have this one workout that we'll work on that'll be a key workout for 4 to 6 weeks, and you get multiple shots at it and chances to not that you ever have a perfect workout, but you might say, okay, I'm going to go out and choose this hill or this stretch of road, and maybe pace myself a certain way, and you make some mistakes, and then you come back next week and you try it again and hopefully do it a little bit better.
It makes it easier for us as coaches and for athletes to also measure progress or check in and say, hey, what's going wrong here? How can we correct this? It
Totally.
kind of puts a line in the sand. And I find that I personally like to try and achieve some level of mastery with my workouts.
Yeah.
And I like to see a direction with those workouts. And with really complicated workouts, especially if you're increasing volume with a complicated workout, it can be challenging to do that.
Yeah. Do you think there's any advantage to doing a more complicated workout?
Yeah. There are times, again, I'll bring up cyclocross racing because it's such a high variability discipline.
Yeah.
Where, workouts I tend to give, that's where I might give somebody a more complicated in terms of, high, low type intervals and a lot of repetition. But there, when I give a complicated workout, we spend some time on the phone explaining the thought behind why that workout is important, so that if they're in the heat of battle there, and they can understand what they're doing. And it's, again, I draw on the painter's tape on the top tube. They're not constantly looking down at that, or they're, looking at the little bumps on their Garmin computer.
Right.
I want them to see what's coming ahead of them and not have their head buried in the data.
Yeah. So here's where I don't know, maybe we might differ a little bit, because I definitely think there's times when having a complicated workout might almost distract somebody from the pain a little bit. Maybe it's a little bit of, the term chunking.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Is a great term.
Just got to get to that telephone pole up there.
Yeah, exactly. Like, an example is like a 2 by 20 minute interval, really common workout, 2 by 20 minutes at 100% of threshold. I think it's a workout like just about every cyclist has done, but 20 minutes can be a long time to mentally wrap your head around. And, you could prescribe that like an over under 20-minute interval, like 2 minutes at 96% of threshold, 30 seconds at 120%, then back down to 96%, times 8. And actually, the average power comes out over threshold. But I know a lot of people, including myself, I think, who would say that's actually an easier workout to get through mentally, because you never have an interval over 2 minutes.
Right.
Now, executing it on the road might be more difficult, to have that kind of control. That's probably a workout I'd be more likely to prescribe if I knew somebody was doing it indoors, because actually having, say, 96% of threshold, and that, you're calculating it to do on the road. But if you've got it like on Zwift or whatever, and you're doing it on erg mode, it just comes up. It's a little bit different.
Well, I think you hit on something really important there, which is, are you doing it inside or are you doing it outside?
Yeah.
And I would be more likely to prescribe something like that inside for a rider because, it can be mind numbing to sit on a trainer for a good bit of time. And certainly when you're doing a more high intensity workout, for sure. But I also have riders who, it's one of the questions I ask them when I do an intake. Do you like repetitive workouts and trying to do just doing the same thing bother you? Or, do you want something that, like you said, we're going to shoot for a similar adaptation. We're just going to break it up in a different fashion each time. But the end goal is the same. So, I have riders whose minds work one way and whose minds work the other way. And, as a coach, I feel it's my job to cater to that. So,
Yeah.
well, it's more challenging for me as a coach to wrap my head around the more complicated stuff. I do have riders that like it, and I will tend to kind of bend my own rules for them.
Yeah. I know that I have prescribed some like race simulation type workouts that's sort of like a kitchen sink workout. Like I've got a number of these where, maybe you ride an hour at endurance and then you go into like a series of attack intervals where you're to simulate a breakaway for me, attack for 30 seconds and settle into tempo. And then the next hour is like an hour of, 15 seconds on, 45 seconds off to simulate pulling through. And then it finishes off with a big sprint where, you ramp up for 3 minutes and then sprint all out for 15. And I think physiologically, there may not be a lot of advantage to combining all those things in a workout, but I think psychologically there can be a huge advantage, especially if somebody really gets through that and feels like they succeeded at it and knows that if they can do it in training, they can do it in a race too.
Absolutely. The psychological aspect of here's what's about to get thrown at me for the next 2-3 hours. There's absolutely something of value there. From a mountain bike standpoint, we might, starting some of the higher intensity workouts out with a whole shot, and then throwing in some random high intensity intervals because, hey, there's a log you have to get over or a short, steep climb. But I really focus on dishing out those workouts when we get closer to an event. I definitely don't disagree with you that there is a time and a place for complicated workouts. And I think you're right on with the psychological aspect of it. Mentally, you have to be prepared.
Yeah. So what is the most complicated workout you've ever done or ever prescribed?
Done. Prescribed. I came up with a crazy one to give one of my. Actually, it's the jersey that's sitting behind me right here.
Okay.
A rider I have. It's the ACCC Cycling Championship jersey.
Okay.
So this is a rider of mine who was an incredible time trialist. I mean, she could just ride at her threshold for a really long time. Total powerhouse. Crits, not so great. So we had to, half of every weekend in the ACCC was crit racing.
Right.
So we had to really work at her ability to snap the rubber band, because once she snapped the rubber band, the race was hers. So we did a workout that was kind of like what you were talking about. We more or less sprinted for the first corner, lots of high variability, high, low, high, low, high, low, and then settled into a race tempo. And then did that on the back end of the tempo block. So it was kind of up, down, up, down, up, down, long, hard effort, and then repeat to simulate the demands of, a high level crit. And it worked, shockingly.
Okay.
She hated it. She hated him. She absolutely hated him. Every Wednesday she was doing, I can't remember what I called them. Maybe it was like crit winning. You kind of like your race winning interval where you go really hard for 30 seconds, settle into a race pace, and then sprint again at the end of that for another 30 seconds. We kind of did that in more of a crit format.
Yeah. Well, sometimes in my experience, a lot of times riders hate the workouts that they most need to do. And they're like, something is wrong with this workout. It's not.
I would say 90% of the time it's 100%.
It's like, well, it might be a sign that this is a workout you really need to do.
Absolutely. And when you've been with a rider for more than a year or so, they start to expect these workouts, and they know, okay, well, crit season's coming. Here comes the kitchen sink type workouts. I mean, that's probably one of the more complicated ones I've prescribed. I've done a lot of like kind of countdown workouts where it's like sprint for a minute, recover, sprint for 50 seconds, recover all the way down to 10 seconds to 0. And looking at those just as like kind of mind bending.
Right.
Or doing that in a pyramid format.
Yeah.
What about you?
Well, there's a couple that come to mind. I once led like a 10-week indoor cyclocross class, and I know that sounds counterintuitive, and a lot of people, it took some convincing, like, indoor cyclocross class. So let me give the disclaimer that this was not in place of outdoor workouts and skills work and race simulations and stuff. But I actually thought it worked really well. I mean, because people forget cyclocross season, darkest days of the year, crappy weather. If they're racing twice during the weekend, they're spending half the week maintaining their bike anyway. So, having one indoor cyclocross class was kind of nice, but it had all of these crazy intervals in it. A lot of race starts, a lot of sprints of various lengths, attack intervals type stuff. And part of almost every workout was to do these like 3-part micro intervals where it would be like 10 seconds on, 6 seconds, 6 seconds soft pedal, then 2 seconds coast, which is something you never do on an indoor trainer, but it would simulate a lot of cross racing. If you look at the power file from a cyclocross race, it's always in one of those 3 modes. You're always either like sub-max or soft pedaling because you're going around a turn or something you can't really stomp on, or coasting. Coming into a turn, coming into a barrier or something. And then you have to accelerate out of that coasting period. But this is something that it needed to be in the class setting where they had me saying, okay, now you're doing this in real time. Or you could program that into a computer and have the instructions coming up all the time. It wouldn't be something that would be very good to say, hey, here's the workout, here's the 10 pages of workout instructions.
Yeah, I think I've seen, I've definitely given a similar workout in a 30-30 format where it's, like sprint, run, coast type of stuff. Yeah. And, you look at that at its face value and you're like, holy crap, this is just a ton of different stuff. But there is a simplicity to its complicatedness though, right? It's you're basically doing the same 3 things over and over and over again. And there's, like you said, there's an absolute application to it. One of the things that I don't understand is when coaches throw workouts like that at people, like, in January when they're not racing until September or October.
Yeah. Well, I think there might be a little bit of somebody's probably more likely to be indoors in January.
Right. Sure.
So it goes back to like the chunking and breaking it down. But do you feel like as your coaching career has progressed, you've changed your attitude on this a little bit? Like, are you more likely now to prescribe more simple, straightforward workouts than maybe 10 years ago?
Yeah, absolutely. I as a new coach, I think I felt like if I wasn't giving a lot of variety, that my client might feel like I wasn't doing my job, or
Yeah, yeah.
I wasn't trying. And one of the things that I really prided myself in was, you know, not being a lazy coach and not just cut and paste and cut and paste, because I know I hated that as an athlete.
Mhm.
And I recruited a lot of clients on the foundation of like, hey, I'm paying attention to you. I'm no longer focused on my own racing because I want to make sure I'm doing the right thing for you.
Mhm.
Now, I'm not doing complicated for complicated sake. These are the things that work for what you're training for. Sometimes I'm just like, hey, sorry, it's repetitive, but this is what's going to get you to where you need to be. I have a rider that's training for UCI Marathon Worlds. There's a lot of sweet spot involved
Mhm.
in that training. Hours of high intensity aerobic riding, because that's what a marathon mountain bike race is.
Right.
And we had a very frank discussion at the beginning of her training that was like, there's going to be a lot of sweet spot and a lot of endurance riding. And it's going to look very, volume's going to increase. We're certainly, uh, going to change things around week by week, but the type of interval is going to be very similar right up until we get close to events.
Mhm.
So yeah, absolutely. Things have changed. Keep it simple, stupid is kind of like right at the forefront of my brain. But that said, sometimes I have riders that are like motivated by variety, and so it's incumbent on me. It's their dime. I need
Yeah.
to make sure that it fits their training. But if they want a little bit of variety, I can do that. What
Yeah.
about you?
I think I'm pretty much in the same boat. I think I used to have an attitude like I can never prescribe the same workout 2 times. And
Yeah,
it was maybe a little bit of insecurity on my part, feeling like I needed to, like that was the special sauce, is these special workouts. And I sort of realized like, no, that doesn't really, you're not making it better just by making it more complicated. The special sauce is how you put it together. It's like, I heard somebody use the analogy of music, like a musician, and I'm I'm no musician, but if you said, okay, here's the D flat key on the piano, I could hit that key, right? That's like a workout. It's not being able to hit that one note, that one workout that's special. It's putting them together, in what order and for how long, and working them all together that makes the music.
totally, totally.
So
It's the workouts are out there. We're never reinventing the wheel here.
yeah.
I always like to tell people, if they have enough self motivation to go out and buy a $99 year long training plan, by all means, I'm going to be prescribing some of those same workouts more than likely. But when you're working with a coach, like you said, you're paying for that glue that holds all this together and arranges it properly, and the accountability that you and I provide as a coach. That's what's different.
Yeah. Um, do you think there's any workouts that are sort of deceptively simple or deceptively complicated. Like somebody might look at it and think, well, that's easy, but it's actually
Long endurance rides.
Or vice versa. Sorry, what's that?
No, long endurance rides.
Oh yeah, well, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, a 4-hour ride in aerobic zone 2. That's harder than it sounds. And you're hungrier than you think you'll be.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like endurance rides are the key ride for every endurance athlete. And, for a lot of people, this is like 40 to 50% of their total training time, at least in the way I prescribe things. And it's really tempting just to look at that as just go ride, which is not the case. I want, first and foremost, I want to see their heart rate below, in zone 2, but I also want to see, I'm looking at how much time they spend coasting, hopefully as little as possible. I'm looking at how variable that is and avoiding surges. Maybe I'm looking at left-right power balance and efficiency of their pedaling. I'm looking for, heart rate power, decoupling, and all of these things. And maybe, are they able to put out more power over time, maybe over years of doing these rides, while maintaining those constraints. So I certainly think it's one of these things that, like, you can do this for years and years and years and you never perfect. And even with my most experienced athletes, I can't remember the last time I looked at an endurance ride and thought that was perfect.
Nailed it. Yeah. I think, especially with other people, sometimes you find those endurance rides either turn into high zone 1 rides.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you ride with Matt and I enough that, you do too much high zone 1 riding, or they turn into a tempo ride because we're getting excited. We're talking about racing, and cadence kicks up and intensity kicks up. So, and also recovery rides, I think for a lot of athletes are they just don't understand how easy it should be. And I think one of the things that is most challenging as a coach is making recovery for athletes and making sure that they're accountable to, I don't want you to ride over 100 watts today. Your grandmother should rollerblade past you on this ride.
Your grandmother rollerblades?
Yeah, man.
That's a cool grandmother.
I'm really worried about her hip strength.
By 80 standards, at least.
Yeah. She wears a fanny pack.
Okay, cool. And like a brim.
Yeah, like, totally.
Anything that you might feel like is deceptively complicated? Like a lot of instructions, but it's really not that complicated?
I think going back to those kind of cyclocross workouts that you and I were talking about, because they look like, there's so much variability, but really it's just 3 simple instructions and you're repeating them over and over and over again. And I know the first time I was given those workouts, I kind of freaked out. And then I realized it's just the same thing, just do it 10 times.
Yeah.
Or, so yeah, absolutely. That the repetitive workout that just has a lot of repetitions.
I thought about strength training workouts too. At least for me, I have a lot of instructions when I prescribe those. And because most of the cyclists I'm coaching are not coming from a strength training background. So I feel like I need to lay everything out and say, this is how you want to do your aerobic warm up and foam rolling and your dynamic stretches. And then I've got diagrams and video links for the exercises. And I talk about, tempo, eccentric, concentric, isometric time, and, aerobic cool down and active stretching afterwards. And it's like, it's a lot of instructions because I'm not there with them. And I'm not a strength and conditioning coach. I feel like I need to lay all that out. But once they get into it and do it a few times, it's like they realize it's not as complicated
Yeah,
as it looks.
it gets in their brain and they're good to go. And it's with strength specifically, you brought up a good point, because it is such a crucial part of training. I really try and send my clients a video of either individual exercises or the entire routine, or me kind of talking through, hey, your hips should be in this position and not this position, because if you're doing, if you're forward flexed here, you're turning off, you're ruining the point of the exercise. So make sure you feel this and not this, or cueing can be such a crucial part of strength training.
Yeah, that's a great point though. With videos, you can get a lot into a video very quickly versus having to describe it in words.
Yeah, absolutely. We have our own series of online YouTube videos that work great for that. But sometimes I'm doing something else, or I might have a rider, or we have a power balance discrepancy, and so we need to do some single leg stuff in addition to their typical strength training, or do some stuff on the bike that I'm cueing, hey, you should feel this inside your hip and not on the outside of your hip, and that's really the whole point of the exercise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, bonus question, bonus round here. Best cycling movie ever, Breaking Away or American Flyers? Those are the only two choices.
Those are the only two choices. Man, Premium Rush is not in there.
Premium.
I would have to say, I like American Flyers a lot. Coors Classic is a race that of course I never got to do, but all the old guys always told me about the Coors Classic, and
I thought it was Red Zinger.
Yeah, the Red Zinger. Yeah.
Maybe they were the same race. I
don't know. It's just like, core states and, whatever the Philly race has become. Yeah. I would say American Flyers. That's the real motivator for me.
Yeah. Bad movie, great cycling movie.
Absolutely.
Did you know?
I actually bought a cowboy hat at one point and rode around with a cowboy hat on, and then realized how stupid I was.
Nice. Do you know trivia about that movie? I think it was the writer who wrote both of those movies actually rode like the Cat 4 race at Red Zinger with this 30-pound camera on his handlebars to get some of those the scenes where they show them. And if you watch the movie, you can tell exactly which ones.
Yeah, looking at chain placement and all of that. Which
you can tell that it's not a pro field.
Right. You're like, no way, these people are all over the road.
Yeah. All right. So thanks for watching, everybody. Please like and subscribe to this channel. Write in the comments section your questions, or if you have any suggestions for further topics.
Or other cycling movies.
Yeah. And what's the saying? Res firma, mitestra, niscrit. Once you got it up, keep it up.
That's right.